Hello everyone, welcome back to Science Mentor. I hope you all are doing well. Today we are starting one of the most important topic in forensic science, forensic photography. Okay, forensic photography. So if you are preparing for DSSSB JSA या फिर state FSL examinations or any competitive examination related to the forensic science, okay. So this topic is extremely important because questions are frequently asked from its definition, objective, principle, and type of photograph, equipment, lighting technique, and important rules. So before we begin, let me tell you one thing. This is not going to be a self slide reading session. Okay, the slides are only here to guide us. Our main focus will be understanding the concept in depth. Throughout this lecture, I will write important notes on the board, explain every concept with practical examples, discuss possible examination question, and help you understand how forensic photography is actually used during the criminal investigation. So keep your notebook with you because you will have enough material to prepare the entire topic from today's lecture. Okay, now let me begin with a simple question. Imagine that murder has been taken place inside a room. The forensic team reached the crime scene. There are blood stains on the floors. The knife is lying near the victim and there are fingerprint on the glass. Okay, so what should the forensic team do first? Should they collect the knife or should they lift the fingerprint or should they photograph the entire crime scene first? Okay, so the correct answer is they should photograph the crime scene first. Okay, so today by the end of this lecture you will understand exactly why. Okay, so let me have a blank page so I can write add page. Okay, okay. So what we are going to write is forensic photography. Okay. So definition of the today's topic I'm going to write is forensic photography is a specialized branch of forensic science. Okay, that deals with the accurate, systematic, and permanent photographic documentation of crime scene, documentation of crime crime scene physical evidences, and injuries for investigation and legal purpose. Okay, so this is the definition. So today learning objective is what what we are going to learn today is history of forensic science, forensic photography. Okay, let me write what we are today learning is history, then definition and objective, then fundamental principles. Okay, so there are more topics like types of crime scene photography, equipment used, lighting techniques, important examination fact, and other practice MCQs. So for today's lecture, we are going to cover only these three topics. If we have to cover all these topic in a single video, then the length of the video is going to be very large. Okay, so today's lecture is based only on these topics. Okay, so notice the word I have written. I have deliberately written the words like accurate, systematic, and permanent. Okay, so accurate, systematic, and permanent. Okay, so these three words describe forensic photography better than anything else. So if the photograph is not accurate, it may mislead the investigation. If the photograph is not systematic, important evidence may be missed. If it is not permanent, investigator cannot refer it to during the trial. Therefore, forensic therefore every forensic photograph must satisfy these three conditions. Okay. So let us compare ordinary photography with forensic photography. When we use our mobile, why do we actually take photograph? Okay. So we take photograph to capture memories, to upload them on social media, to preserve special moments. But sometimes we even edit them by changing brightness, contrast, and colors. But forensic photography is completely different. Here, the purpose is not beauty, the purpose is truth. Nothing should be added, nothing should be removed, nothing should be altered. Okay, the photograph should represent the crime scene exactly as existed. Okay, so I'm going to take another page. Okay, so here we are writing a difference between ordinary photography versus forensic photography. So the ordinary photography must be artistic. Okay, and here it is scientific. Okay, then can be edited. Ordinary photography can be edited. On the other hand, editing is not permitted. Okay, on the original document, no editing should be permitted. It's for personal use. Okay. And here, investigation and legal purpose. Legal purpose. Okay. It is completely subjective. Here it is objective. Okay. So the comparison is very important. Suppose you click a family photograph. If the image is slightly brighter than reality, nobody is care. But imagine a blood stain appearing darker or lighter because someone edited the photograph. So could that affect the interpretation of the evidence? Yes. That is why forensic photograph must be remain objective. Okay. So imagine a suspect enter through a broken window. On the window frame there are fingerprints. Near the window there are shoes impressions. The screwdriver lying on the floor. Now suppose an investigator immediately pick up the screwdriver before taking a photograph. What happened? So the original position of the evidence is lost forever. Later, someone may ask in the court, how do you even know the screwdriver was lying near the window? Without photograph, there is no visual proof of its original location. Okay, so this is why professional investigator always follow basic rule. Photograph first, collection of evidence later. Okay, so here is a golden rule of crime scene documentation is never disturb, move or collect evidence before it has been properly photographed and documented. Okay. So if the examiner asks why is forensic photography performed before the evidence collection? Okay, so you have to explain the forensic photography preserve the original conditions of the crime scene, record the exact position of evidence and provide a reliable visual documentation and maybe later presented in the court. Okay, now we understand why forensic photography is important. Let us look at what we are going to learn throughout this lecture. Next slide gives us the complete roadmap of today's session. Before we begin, the fascinating theory of forensic photography. Okay, I am changing the slide. So, what you will learn today. Okay, so let us first understand what we are going to cover in today's lecture. Not today's lecture, but this topic, which is forensic photography. Okay, whenever I teach a new topic, I would like to give a roadmap first. The reason is simple. If you know where the lecture is going, it becomes much easier to connect with every concept. Okay, so today's lecture is designed exactly like a real forensic investigation. We will not randomly study topics. Okay, we will move step by step, just a forensic expert would work at the crime scene. Okay, first we will understand how forensic photography started. Okay, so then we will see how it became a part of criminal investigation. Okay, so first we study history, then evaluation. Okay, after that we will discuss its objectives. Okay, because every scientific technique has a purpose. Once we know why is it used, we will study the principle of every forensic photographer must follow. Okay, so then we can study about type of photography, photographic angles. Okay, after that we will discuss the equipment, lighting techniques. Okay, equipments and the lighting techniques. Okay, and then we will cover some MCQs based on this topic, which is very important for the your DSSSB JSA exam. Okay, and we will also cover some exam facts. Okay, so I want all you to notice one thing. This lecture is not useful for DSSSB JSA only. If you are preparing for state FSL examination or even university practical examination, so don't, it may be helpful for you. So don't memorize this topic, understand them. Okay, so in the history, we will study how forensic photography began. Okay, in the evolution, how it's entered criminal investigation. Then objective, why forensic photography is necessary. And we have to study about the principles also. So rules every forensic photographer should follow. So let me write about the principles. Okay. We are also going to study principle. Okay. Principles. Okay. Principle we have to study here after the objectives. Okay. Then we study about the types of photography, which is overall, mid-range or close-up photograph. Okay. Then we study about for photographic angles, then equipments like camera lens, tripod, flash, then lightning, visible UV, IR, oblique light. Then we discuss some MCQs. Okay. So notice something interesting. The order is logical. We are not directly jumping to the equipment on cameras. Why? Because if you don't understand why forensic photography exists, learning camera type will not helpful. In science, we will always move from basic concept to practical examination. Okay, practical applications. Okay. Always remember, a good forensic photograph depend more on the photographer's knowledge than the camera's price. Okay. So there are three things every forensic photographer need is scientific observation, knowledge of cybercrime procedures, and proper photographic techniques. Many beginners believe that forensic photography is all about buying a DSLR camera. No, this is a misconception. Okay, so let's move to another blank slide. So let me explain you orally without writing it. So five questions before taking the photograph. Every forensic investigator should ask themselves, what are these? Has the entire crime scene have been secured? Has anyone moved any evidence? What should we photograph first? From which position should I begin? Is this scene properly documented? Okay, so if you develop the habit of these five questions, you will naturally understand every topic that comes later in this lecture. So when we study overall photograph, mid-range photograph and close photograph, you will already know why they are taken in a particular order. Okay, so for let's move to the next slide, which is okay. So every scientific discipline has a story behind it. Okay, forensic photography do not appear overnight. It evolved through the contribution of several scientists over many years. Okay, so let's travel back to the 19th century and understand how sorry, 18th century. Okay, understand how photography was invented and how it eventually became one of the strongest tool in the forensic science. Okay, so now begin with the history of forensic science. Forensic photography. So whenever a student hear a word history, they immediately think they only have to memorize date. But that is wrong approach. History is not just about remembering years. It helps us understand how a simple investigation gradually become one of the most powerful tool in the criminal investigation. So today, if investigators reach a crime scene, one of very first thing they do is document everything with photograph. But but this was not always the case. There was a time when cameras does not even exist. Okay, so let me ask you a simple question. Imagine you are a police officer in the year 1800. A murder has been taken place. How would you preserve the crime scene? Okay, so most probably you would draw sketches, write notes, and depend on eyewitnesses. Now think about the problem. One officer may draw the room differently, another officer may forget the exact position of the weapon, the witness may remember the color of shirt incorrectly. Human memory is not perfect, okay? So so this is why investigator need something that could record the scene exactly is appeared. Okay. Here forensic photography solve the problem. Okay, so now we have to take a blank slide. I'm going to explain you something. Okay, so let's take a add page. Okay, okay, red is working properly. I'm going to take white. White is also. So before camera, investigator depend on. So before camera, let's increase the some. So before camera, investigator depend on writing notes. Okay, hand drawn sketches, personal observations, and the problem is human memory can fail. Sketches may be inaccurate. Okay, so sketches may be inaccurate. Human memory fails. Okay, and important details may be forgotten. Different people observe the same scene differently. Okay, here is the drawback is different people observe differently. Okay, so this is the first idea you should understand. Photography will not replace, did not replace observation. It improved observation. Even today, investigators prepare sketches and written notes, but photograph provide visual confirmation of everything present at the scene. Okay, so let us move to the history of scientific development of photography. So the history of photography is usually explained through three important scientists. Okay, let's move to the history page. Okay, yes. Okay, one of these three are more important for your examination. Okay, now I'm going to write these on blank board. Move to the okay. Okay, let me take a pen first. So first we write year. This is very going to increase the size of the brush. So here we write year. Here we write scientist name. Remember these scientists are important and their contribution. Okay, so in the year 1826, scientist name Joseph is for Nips. Okay, so what are the contribution is first permanent photograph. Okay. Second is 1839. Louis Dagberry. Okay. Dagberry process. Daguerreotype. Writing it in. Daguerreotype process. And the third is, it's again 1839. William Henry Fox Talbot. So the contribution is calotype process. Okay. So let's start with the Nips. So in 1826, he produced what is generally recognized as the world first permanent photograph. Okay. This was an extraordinary achievement because nobody had successfully preserved an image permanently before this. So, however, this process is extremely slow. The exposure time was not few seconds, it was several hours. Can you imagine asking a person to remain still for hours just to take one photograph? It sounds impossible today. But this is how photography began, okay? So suppose I ask one of you to stand in front of the class without moving for 6 hours. Can anyone do that? Of course not. Now imagine trying to photograph a moving vehicle or a running person with a technology. It simply wasn't possible. So that show how much camera technology has been improved over time. Okay, so the Joseph Nips in 1920 in 1826 contribution is produced the first permanent photograph used in early photographic process. Okay, or he's also laid down the foundation of modern photography. Okay, so important point is about Nips is he started the journey of permanent image recording. Let's move to the next scientist, which is Louis Daguerre. Okay, I'm going to move the slides. Okay, so here is the Louis Daguerre, daguerreotype photography. Okay, so many students confuse between Nips and Daguerre. Remember this carefully. Nips demonstrated the permanent photograph was possible, and Daguerre improved the technology and introduced the daguerreotype process in 1839. Okay, this process produced clear images and made photography more practical. Okay, so it is introduced first in commercial viable photographic processes. Okay, so the daguerreotype become the first commercial successful photographic process. Okay, in simple word, photography was no longer just a scientific experiment. People would actually begin using it. So, so the daguerreotype process is better image quality. Let me write. Here is better image quality. Okay, more practical than earlier methods. Yeah, more practical and first commercial. Okay, first commercial successful photography. Okay, let me ask you something. What is the difference between the invention or an improvement? Okay, so the here Nips proved that the photography could exist and Daguerre made it useful for the society. That is why both scientists are equally important. Okay, one of the scientists is introduced photography and other is improved improved the photography. So let's move to the third scientist, who is William Henry Fox Talbot. Okay, who give calotype processes. Okay, so also in 1839 he introduced the calotype process. This was a major breakthrough because it introduced the idea of producing multiple print from a single negative. Earlier, reproducing photograph was very difficult, but Talbot method solved the problem. Okay, so the calotype process key features are introduce the negative positive system. Let me write it. Let's change the. Okay, where's the pen going? It's not visible. There is a black one. Okay, so the black is here. Introduce positive negative system. Okay, introduced positive and negative system. Okay, multiple copied should be produced. Multiple copies can be produced. Okay, become the foundation of later film photography. Okay, this so the calotype process will become the foundation of the film photography later. Okay, so why is it matter? Think about forensic investigation. Suppose a police have only one photograph of a crime scene. If that single photograph is damaged, an important piece of evidence may be lost. Now imagine having multiple identical copies. One can be preserved in record, another can be sent to forensic laboratory, another must be presented in the court. So Talbot contribution eventually made this idea possible. Okay, now moving to the next. Okay, so for DSSSB JSA, don't just memorize the years. Remember the contribution associated with the each scientist. Okay, so the examiner is much more likely to ask who introduced the daguerreotype process. So the answer is daguerre. Okay, and who developed the calotype process rather than asking only the year. Okay, so before we move on to the next slide, answer this question mentally, or you have to write in the comment section. So the question one is who produced the first permanent photograph? Question 2 is who introduced the daguerreotype process? Question third is which scientist developed the calotype process? And fourth is why was the calotype process an important advancement? Okay, so if you can answer these four questions without looking at your notes, you have understand the historical foundation of the photography. Now that we know how photography developed scientifically, the next question is even more interesting. So how did this invention become the part of police investigation? And when did the investigators realize that cameras could document crime scene, identify criminal, and preserve evidence? Okay, so that transformation marks the beginning of forensic photography, and we will study in the next slide. So let's move to the next slide. So okay, here is the evolution into forensic practices. Okay, so now we know how photography was invented. Okay, so let me ask you another important question. Did people immediately start using photography for crime scene investigation? So the answer is no. In the beginning, photography was mainly used for portraits, family photograph, landscapes, and scientific experiments. Nobody imagined that one day it would become one of the strongest form of evidence in criminal courts. Okay, so the next phase is in history was not about inventing a better camera. It was about discovering how photography could help the police and forensic experts. This is where forensic photography truly begins. Okay, so now imagine you are a police officer in 1850s. You arrest a criminal. Okay, so how will you identify the same criminal 5 years later If he changes his name, would you depend only on the written records? So the answer is no. The photograph would be much more reliable than the written records. So the simple idea, change police investigation forever. Okay, so the evolution of the photograph is, so let me have a blank slide, add page. So let me take white pen or red pen. So photography was first used for portraits, okay, family photos, scientific documentation. Okay, later it became useful for criminal identification, police record. Okay, so later become useful for criminal identification, police records. Okay, then crime scene documentation, court evidence. So photography gradually changed from an artistic tool into a scientific investigation tool. Okay, so this transition is very important. The camera itself did not change the investigation. The purpose of using the camera changed. Instead of creating beautiful photograph, investigators start document accurate record. Okay, let's move to the slide we are studying. Okay, now okay, so here is the early mugshots first. Okay, so one of the earliest police in application of photography was mugshots. Most of you hear this word in movies, but what exactly is a mugshot? So a mugshot is a standard protocol photograph of an arrested person, usually taken from the front side and the side. Okay, front and the side. So let me write. It is a standard photograph. Standard photograph. Okay, front, front view and the side view. Okay, its purpose is not to make a person look good. It is a purpose of identification. Okay, so the a mugshot is a standard police photograph of an arrested person taken for identification and official records. So standard views are front view and side view. Okay, and the purpose is criminal identification, police database, future investigations. Okay, suppose a criminal commit a offense in Delhi today. 3 years later, he is arrested in another state under a different name. So the police compare his mugshots with previous record. This helps establish whether he is the same individual or not. This is why mugshot become an important part of policing. Okay, So now we come to the most important personality. Okay, on this slide, if there is one name you must remember from today's lecture, it is Alphonse Bertillon. Okay, where is so here is the Alphonse Bertillon system. Bertillon system. Okay, so he is widely known as the father of forensic photography. Okay, father of father of forensic photography is Alphonse Bertillon. Okay, Alphonse Bertillon. Okay, but why? Did he invent the camera? So the answer is no. Did he discover photography? Also the answer is no. So why is the father? Why he is the father of modern forensic photography? Because his contribution was much more practical. Okay, let we have a blank slide so we can write about Alphonse Bertillon. Okay, so Alphonse. Okay, so known as father of forensic photography. Okay, and the major contributions. Okay, so we are writing the major contribution. Set standard protocol for crime scene photography. Set standard protocol for crime scene photography. Okay, standard protocol for mugshot photograph. Standard protocol for mugshot. Introduced systematic documentation. Okay, then improve police identification methods. Police identification methods. Okay, so before Bertillon, investigators photograph crime scene according to their own preference. One investigator stood close to the evidence, another stood far away. So the same photograph from someone take the same photograph from the left and someone else photographed from the right. So there was no standard procedure. Now imagine presenting these photographs in court, different angle, different distance could create confusion. Okay, so Bertillon solved this problem. he introduced a systematic method. Every important object should be photographed in a consistent and organized manner. This made photograph much more useful for investigation and legal proceedings. Okay, so the why standard protocols matter. Okay, so why standard protocol matter. Okay, so without standard protocol, different camera angle, different distances, inconsistent record, difficult comparison. Okay, so with standard protocols, there is a uniform documentation. Okay, uniform documentation. Then accurate reconstruction, stronger courtroom evidence, okay. Imagine a crime. So a knife lying beside the victim. If one investigator photograph it from 2 meter away and another photograph it from only 20 centimeter away, without any reference scale, the apparent size of the knife may be look completely different. So the lawyer could argue that the photograph was misleading. So, however, if every investigator follow a standard method, such confusion is avoided completely. So this is exactly why Bertillon work was revolutionary. Okay. So modern digital photography. So now we know that today we have a modern digital photography. So the technology continue to develop. Film cameras were gradually replaced by the digital cameras, and this change made forensic photography faster, more accurate, and more reliable. Okay. So I'm also going to write about advantages of digital photography. So where is the pen? So advantages of digital photography. Okay. So I'm writing instant image review, then high resolution photograph. Okay. Then large storage capacity. Then easy image organization. Let me raise easy image organization. Okay. Metadata recording, and then raw images preservation. Okay, so now the term metadata come. Okay, so what is metadata? So one feature student often ignore is metadata. So metadata simply means information stored with the photograph. Okay, so there is some information which automatically saved with the photograph, which is date, time, camera model, camera setting, and file information. Okay, so this information can be extremely useful during an investigation because it helps verify when and how a photograph was taken. Okay, so in a professional forensic work, investigator usually preserve the original raw image. Okay, why? Because raw files contain the maximum amount of image information and reduce the possibility of evidence being questioned. So if brightness, color or contrast need adjustment for analysis, investigator normally work on duplicate copy while preserving the original file. Okay. So why preserving original image is necessary? Because store the raw file safely. Never overwrite on originals. Okay. Perform analysis on duplicate copies and maintain proper documentation for every photograph. Okay, so for examination, remember these 4 points. Father of forensic photography, Alphonse Bertillon. Purpose of mugshot is criminal identification. Digital photography allow immediate review of images. Okay, and original forensic photograph should always be preserved without alteration. Okay, so some questions are there which I am going to ask. So you can answer these in comment section. Oh, okay. So what is mugshot? The question number one. And the question number two is why is Alphonse Bertillon called the father of forensic photography? And the question number three is why is standard protocol important in crime scene photography? And the question four is what are the two advantages of digital photography? And question five is why should the original raw image should be preserved? If you can answer these questions confidently, then you have understood how photography evolved over a simple investigation into a essential forensic investigation tool. Okay, so now we understand the historical development of forensic photography. So the next question is how does forensic photography really makes a difference in actual crime investigation? Okay, so to answer that that we will discuss some landmark Indian cases that demonstrate why proper crime scene photography is so important and what lesson every forensic investigator should learn from them. Okay, so we will discuss these in upcoming lectures. Okay, for today. So the length of the lecture is already too much. Okay, so let's end this lecture here. Okay, so Jai Hind.